Hello and welcome to the PeopleSoft Innovation Summit, Transforming Higher Ed and Healthcare for 2026. My name is Jay Ferris. I'm an Executive Director here at Pathlock, and I'll be your moderator today. One of the things that makes this event unique is the varied number of voices that we're going to have on the stage today. So we've got everyone from an Oracle ace to a former FBI cybercrime agent, PeopleSoft customer in the higher education space, practitioner and a consulting leader in the space. So when Pathlock is proud to sponsor this event, when we originally set up the first one was back in 2020 during the COVID era when people weren't able to go to Quest summits. So Pathlock ever since has been proud to sponsor this kind of content to foster the community and bring up different roles, different industries, different experiences, all with one common mission: to secure and transform PeopleSoft for the future. So over the next 2 hours, you will gain strategic perspectives. You'll hear customer success stories. You'll hear FBI lessons. You'll explore configuration best practices, discover smarter testing approaches. And finally, all of our experts will come together for a live Q&A panel at the end. Before we begin, just a couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar is intended to last 2 hours. So it's going to be a little bit of a speed round today. You will be able to submit questions via the Q&A box, so please feel free to put your questions in the chat Q&A box. All attendees will be on mute just for the continuity of the presenters this afternoon. And the slides and the recording will be shared after the webinar. So let's introduce our speakers today. I'm thrilled to be moderating today's panel. We've got an incredible lineup with us. From consulting, we have Larry Zagata, who's president of MyPro Consulting. Representing the Oracle ACE community, we've got someone everyone knows, Jim Marion, People Tools instructor and practitioner extraordinaire. Bringing the law enforcement perspective, we're pleased to have Scott Agenbaum join us, who is a retired FBI agent and cybercrime prevention expert. From the customer panel side, we've got Charles Lukes, who is the PeopleSoft Security Administrator at Lee County Schools. And then finally, from the solution provider perspective, my colleague, Greg Wimp, who is a 25-year practitioner at PeopleSoft that we're blessed to have on staff here at Pathlock as our Director of Security Solutions. So hopefully with this mix between customer, consultant, Oracle ACE, FBI, and solution, today's discussion will be practical, well-rounded, full of insights, and some good information you can take back to your own organization. So as you can see, our summit's designed to keep things dynamic and practical. It's going to be a bit of a fast-paced session today. Each session is only going to last about 20 minutes, so you're going to get a steady flow of insights without losing any momentum. We're going to start with Greg Wendt, who's going to open us up learning about the security imperative, framing the challenges that higher ed and healthcare are facing today. And then we're going to follow that up with a customer success story showing how automation can make a real impact as a PeopleSoft practitioner. We'll have a session after that where Scott will walk us through cybercrime in healthcare and why the risks are so high and what lessons we can learn from him. After that, we're going to look at some configuration frameworks and how they can enhance PeopleSoft usability. And then finally, we'll have a deep dive into the PeopleSoft testing framework and regression testing with Jim Marion, the foremost expert in that area. And then finally, we'll close with a live Q&A panel, bringing all the panelists together with an opportunity for you guys to get your questions answered. So I think it's going to be a great session today. Looking forward to crisp, short presentations designed to give you some concrete takeaways. With that, let's kick off the summit by taking a step back first and looking at the big picture, setting the stage for our discussions with our first speaker, Greg Wendt, as I mentioned, Executive Director of Security Solutions here at Pathlock. So Greg, walk us through top security trends that you see kind of shaping higher education and healthcare today. And, why maybe not taking action might prove far more costly than being proactive. So, Greg, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Jay. So I just like to thank everybody for attending as well. We've enjoyed putting on these sessions for the last several years. As Jay said, we've been doing this for a while. It is about providing content to the PeopleSoft customers that are out there. I think these have been very, very valuable over the years, and it's always a joy to work with our partners and customers to present this information to you guys. So some of the things that we wanted to talk about, I'm just going to talk real briefly today to kind of kick off the session, is a little bit of some of the lessons learned. And I'm actually going to add some content to this slide anyway. So when we talk about some of the scenarios that are out there, you look at some of the breaches or challenges that have occurred. I'm not going to read through each one of these bullet points. You guys can read the slides as well as I can. But it's one of those scenarios where when you look at the United Healthcare situation in February of 24, it was really credentials that were exploited via a server that lacked the MFA side of the enforcing MFA. So when you see that situation and you think, well, that was just an organization that maybe had bad policies, bad procedures, they didn't implement the things that they needed to across the board. This comes up a lot, far more frequently than what you're seeing. We talk to organizations across the board, the different challenges that they face. Obviously, I'm not going to go into details about, specific cases and things like that. But, when you talk about MFA, there's a lot of different attack vectors around MFA. There's also a lot of choices that customers have made with how they implement MFA. Let's say at the single sign-on implementation. So I'm going to only do it at SSO. But when we think about how everybody lives within the PeopleSoft world, there's still a lot of direct two-tier connections with PeopleSoft authentication that high privileged accounts still use to access the system. So yes, people have implemented MFA. They're doing a good job of it. There are several attack vectors on that. If we want to go into a whole lot more detail, I could definitely do that on one-on-one calls. But it is something that, the bad actors are targeting that. They have put in some steps that allow to skip out, I'll just kind of call it that way, MFA and work around the problem. So it is something that you need to think about, how your organization is implementing it. Is it successful? Are you having any fringe cases? Because that's where they really start to look it out. And the real big takeaway is fundamentals are critical. You have to have that fundamental layer, and multi-factor really is considered table stakes. You have to be doing that across the board. It is going to help you move up the tree. I was talking to somebody the other day just about the fact of, whether or not, if they were the lowest hanging fruit, they didn't want to be there anymore. So they wanted to make it a little bit more challenging and push the bad guys somewhere else. When we talk about Columbia University, this was done in May and June of 25. 460 gigabits of data stolen, including PII. That's the most sensitive information that you can store inside of your organization. It was very targeted. It was a sophisticated attack, and it remained undetected for a couple of months. There's a couple of issues here, really. One, when somebody's going to come at you like that, a hacktivist, they're looking to attack your organization for multiple different reasons. It could be political. They don't like you, from a university perspective like that. Maybe they expelled the student or the student failed out. There's no telling what the reason is. But from an organizational perspective, it's very easy to find the people who have access to this information and then target them with very targeted, sophisticated attacks. And now they're bringing AI into those attacks as well. So it is something that you have to be very, very diligent around. The other side about it is the fact that this took 2 months to find. It falls directly in line with what all the industry experts say as to how long it takes to find an attack. 2 months is actually pretty good, but when you're talking about losing that type of data, the fallout for it from the organization, from your brand, all of those types of things, it changes how people might view the organization. So there is a lot to that. I'm going to kind of add a little bit right now, because we've been talking to a lot of organizations here lately, especially within higher ed, and they have seen a lot of traction around the hackers trying to gain access and getting EDU email accounts. So whether they're going through and applying to the organization, how that process is playing out. But we've seen definitely a large uptick in that. And I just want to kind of call that out. So it might be something that you want to look at your admissions process when you're creating network accounts, when you're handing out those email addresses, because the hackers are definitely looking for organizations to be able to gain access to those resources out there. So just something I wanted to call out. But it really ties back into the importance of a multi-layered security environment. From the top down or from the bottom up, it depends upon where you want to look at this. It really is, there's not a silver bullet across the board. And all of the organizations that we talk to, all of you on the phone, are in a different point in this particular pyramid. Some of you are very, very mature. Others are just starting. Some of you are going to be blending in between. So when we think about that, the bottom is basically that the authentication and identity management, all the things that we talked about, the table stakes, multi-factor authentication, single sign-on, integration with your identity access management systems, all of those things to make you interact exactly like all of the other applications do in the system. There's multiple reasons why that's important. When we start getting into the transactional layer, there's numerous things that can occur at this particular point. Segregation of duties enforcements. Are people performing, things they shouldn't be able to, fraud and anomaly detection, and then logging. The logging goes back to, it took 2 months to find that particular attack vector of taking information out of the system. 460 gigabytes is not a small amount of data to remove from an organization. So the correct logging or transactional logging and things like that would have really made it much easier to find that up front and probably stop the attack vector before the 2-month period went on and they lost 460 gig. When you talk about the tip of the pyramid there, it really is about data. And it's almost always about data. That's what the hacker was after with the PII. It's about data governance, classification. How do I know what my sensitive data is, where my sensitive data is accesses, who's using it? So it's all about data masking, data loss prevention, being able to make sure that people aren't leveraging and using that data that they don't need access to at the point in time that they need it. We've talked to organizations, I've been doing this for 12 years now at the vendor level, and it's interesting from a maturity perspective. Some of our customers started this 12 to 13 years ago, long before many of the different privacy laws came into effect, because they had very strong security practices and they wanted to protect the data that they had access to. It does make you more mature as an organization, and it's something to think about moving forward. So that's really what that pyramid is about, is building those fundamental blocks together and making sure that you're really checking off on all of those. And it's also going to leverage, balancing security with productivity. Everything is, you've got to make sure that it's worth the time and effort of doing it, right? So when you're sitting there thinking about all of the data that I have in PeopleSoft, security's got to be able to be strict, but it's also got to be flexible enough to allow organizations to implement and do the security roles and modernization that they need for their organization. Everybody does it different. If we go back to PeopleSoft's old acronym, is we work in your world. We're going to do things your way. You can customize it. You can do whatever you want. So a lot of organizations did that. And there's a lot of things that have occurred because of that. So everybody has different roles and models for authentication and access. When we're talking about the risks there, obviously when you're dealing with 2-tier user IDs and passwords, it's not going to be as strong. It's just not going to be as strong as if you're integrating with the SSO provider, your identity provider. There are many different rules, the way you can set up accounts, the way you can set up passwords. It's just far more robust, and that's what it does. PeopleSoft has a good security model, but when you can integrate with best of breed and implement, SSO and multi-factor and really automate provisioning through that process as well. What the key part of that, all the goal there is consistency across your organizational application stack is what you're looking for. You want everybody to do SSO. Why? Because if there's a problem, you can turn them off quickly. It becomes much easier to manage those accounts. So there is a productivity balance. There's a smooth login, onboarding experience. It's very consistent across the organization. which allows people to understand and make less mistakes because it is consistent. There's less out of band access and provisioning and those types of things. When we get into role design and SOD, this is really about broad roles. There's a lot of times, think about it from the perspective of, oh, well, just give them the roles that Greg had. Oh, it's a developer. Just give them what Sally had. Or now we're bringing in a new person and they're going to do payroll. Give them what, Jim had or whoever it is in payroll. There's a lot of security that's done by convenience. There's a lot of organizations that don't do really valid user access reviews or SOD style reviews to where you're really understanding the access that somebody has versus the risks within your organization and what that access means to you. So when you're talking about weighing that against productivity, the users don't want to wait days for special access. They want to be able to do what they need to do. And you need to make sure that they're not stepping out of bounds, or if they are, then you understand what they did when they were stepping out of bounds and those types of areas. So, and that comes in with logging and rule sets and those types of areas. So when we talk about data security, the real risk here is exposing any type of sensitive data. And I say any because, yes, you have the PII, the FERPA, the GDPR data models, and all of those types of things. But, there's also payroll information, but it's also data to your particular implementation. It could be defense information. It could be logistics. It could be inventory, all of those other types of things that are very specific and unique to your organization. So when you're talking about data masking and protecting that data, you need to make sure that you're protecting whatever you deem to be the keys to your kingdom, basically. What makes your organization special? And you need to be able to protect that data. Obviously the sensitive data is the easy part because, it's easier to define. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily easier to find or to mitigate and implement and all of those types of things. So you really have to layer that in with row level and field level security, masking, encryption, and logging. You got to understand where the data is going, who's viewing it, who's working with it, and what they're doing. So all of that's going to give you productivity balances. Users are only going to have access to what they need, and it's also going to be able to protect you in the case of some of those breaches where different hackers are trying to attack you and go at that sensitive information. So I just kind of wanted to talk about a couple of different things today. So I'm going to hand it back to Jay so he can introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Greg. Appreciate those insights. Thanks for sharing and laying out the broader security imperatives and kind of showing us why strengthening controls is critical. So to kind of build on that foundation, let's turn now to a real world example of how those principles can be put into action. Our next session features our good friend, Charles Lukes, who is the security administrator at Lee County Schools. Charles is going to walk us through a project that they did where the district automated compliant provisioning. They reduced access requests and streamlined operations through automation. So it's a great illustration of security and efficiency kind of working hand in hand. So Charles, I'm going to turn it over to you. The stage is yours, sir.
Thanks, Jay. Hi, everybody. I am Charles Lukes, and I am actually currently one of the PeopleSoft system administrators for the school district of Lee County, previously the security administrator. Our school district has about 100,000 students, 118 schools, 13,000 employees. By the way, of which about 4,000 of those employees have elevated permissions. Just in case anybody's curious, we're currently using PeopleTools 861. I won't go over these versions, but if you're curious, this is what we've got. So we are a big fan of PathLock. The school district has utilized the SSO product, the A360 continuous monitoring. We've used the PLC access governance, which is what my presentation today is mostly going to be about. We also are in the process of integrating the UX, user experience platform. And most recently, we signed on for the SOD product as well, which we're going to start implementing soon. So when I was a security administrator, we had a very manual process of requesting permissions So when it came time for someone to get access, if they moved from one position or another, or they were someone new to the district, someone, normally an administrative assistant, would submit an access form on their behalf and request permissions for them. And it would come in the form of an email to myself and another security administrator, and we would attempt to interpret what they need for their roles and then administer that. So during peak times, there could be 20 to 30 of these requests a day. And some of these setups required maybe half an hour, maybe even 40 minutes or so to fully set up these accounts. So it can be a big load. Sometimes we would be backed up for a couple of weeks before we could get everything taken care of. So we started searching for a tool that might be able to help us by automating this. We determined that the permissions generally were in FMS and HCM. We also do have ELM. We're not automating that at this time. But we also, we realized that in addition to just roles, there was a lot of other permissions that we were automating. For instance, like budget access rules, row security in HCM, KK security rules, requester setups, and all kinds of different things, miscellaneous types of permissions that were taking a lot of time to set. We also had another issue with residual roles, where if somebody was in one department, they had a certain set of permissions. And when they moved over to this second department, they normally would continue to have those permissions because we weren't sure if it was time to remove those or if those roles were still part of their new job. So people sometimes had leftover roles from several jobs, which was definitely a problem, especially when we go through things like state role audits. The auditors sometimes would find combinations that seemed inappropriate. Another issue was when a director or a principal changed locations, oftentimes they forgot to revoke their delegations, like absence management. So they would get to the new school and their former administrative assistant at the old school would still have the delegations to their account. So that was something that would come in the form of a help ticket, and you would have to troubleshoot that and eventually remove it from their account. So we also decided that that was something we wanted to automate as well. So we started searching for a solution, and we actually ended up having a meeting with both Jay and Greg. And we talked about this PLC Access Government program. And what really impressed us is how versatile this program was. So in addition to just automating roles, there was also the possibility of automating and kicking off PowerShell scripts, which we found very intriguing since we have all of these custom setups for many of our users. So we decided that we were definitely going to go with this, and I'm excited to see how it could improve our process. So we installed it on a dedicated server, and we have a dev system and a production system. So we created an SQL view, which provides employee ID, username, name, job subfunction, and department for all employees. So we use that as a source for Pathlock. So we basically, instead of reaching out to various tables, we decided to just combine those into a view and provide that ourselves. So Pathlock Cloud uses this to detect the new account changes. So whenever there's a new user, it detects the change, or if someone changed from one department to another, that's how it determines it. So we decided to define the business roles by subfunction in PLC. So for those of you not aware, there's many different job codes in PeopleSoft, but they're organized by job subfunction, which organizes like roles. So for instance, principal has about 12 different job codes. So we've got principal of ESC, principal elementary, principal school of middle school, etc. But they all fall under the same job subfunction, which is 400, and they all get the same permissions. So we decided that it was best to use subfunction instead of trying to automate to all those different job codes. This helps a lot too, because when HR creates a new job code, it still falls under the same subfunction and doesn't require any configuration changes. So the PowerShell scripts, we were excited that Pathlock can write workflows that can initiate PowerShell scripts. So we got to get creative and start developing PowerShell scripts that could automate all of these specialized user setups for our users. So the workflows basically, based on the subfunction and based on the location, will automate these PowerShell scripts. So because we're stressed on time here, I won't go through this script too much, but this is a script for updating row level security. So the first thing is, it calls Opera ID and location. It determines whether it's in the dev environment or the production environment. From there, it basically writes a SQL command to update the table with the user's proper row level security. And then it writes a printout of what it did, and then the workflow emails that to a select group of us to monitor. So in our system integration, I created a flow chart. We have 3 different synchronization type jobs. Synchronized organizational structure detects employee transfers every 3 hours starting at 4 a.m. Synchronized users detects new employee accounts, and synchronized authorization detects changes to PeopleSoft roles and subfunctions. So if there's a new role or subfunction, this is what picks it up. So in the flowchart here, we can see that there's a change to the job record. That's the kind of like the catalyst of the whole procedure. From there, it changes the view, the SQL view that we created. From there, the synchronization jobs are fired off. And then from there, depending upon whether it's HCM or FMS workflows, the system automates roles and starts the PowerShell scripts, which update the other parameters. So these are some of the workflows. So we incorporate new employee FI, so adds FMS roles based on the subfunction, same thing for HR. So if an employee transfers, now this is something that we decided, we're going to remove all existing roles from their account. So that issue that we were having where people end up with roles from their previous job and maybe the previous job to that, now we have a clean slate. So when they move from position A to position B, all those old roles are gone, and the only ones they're going to get are the ones defined for their new job subfunction. We also created a reconciliation workflow so that we could kind of get the system up to date and make sure that all of the employees in our system had the bare minimum roles that were defined for their subfunction. And we ran that once at the very beginning. And you can see the results here in the graph. So in HR Prod, we basically had HCM, we had 116 accounts that didn't have the bare minimum roles. So they might have been missing one, might have been missing more, but they basically didn't have the full setup. And so the system, the Pathlock workflow, updated their accounts. And the same thing in FMS. Actually, in FMS, there's 303 accounts that didn't have the defined role set. And so all of those accounts became up to date. These are some of the PowerShell scripts that we run. Expense manager, so the department's either principal or director has the ability to approve expense reports and travel. So the expense manager will update that for them, update their permissions. Expense reviewers for bookkeepers so they can review those transactions. General ledger setup for looking at budget. KK security rules gives them the ability to view their specific departments and do budget transfers. Procurement authorization gives bookkeepers the ability to make requisitions at their specific department A route control gives approvers the ability to approve requisitions. So these are all different workflows, and we're developing more whenever we find additional uses. We also remove delegator is one of them that we were talking about earlier, that we will actually remove the delegator or the proxy from a director when they move from one location to another. This has really cut down on some of the help tickets related to that. Okay, so now I'm going to actually switch gears and show you a live demo in our dev environment. What we're going to do today is we're going to take a user that is currently an assistant principal. And by the way, this is a fictitious employee. But this employee currently is at location 0842. They are an assistant principal, and we're going to make them a principal and see what the system does for their account. Okay, so first I want to take you to FMS. So our user's name is Kanan, and we're going to open up Kanan's account. And in FMS, we would assign 26 roles for a principal. Currently, Kanan has no roles in FMS. We would need to create a route control for Kanan so that Kanan can approve requisitions. Currently, there is none. We would have give Kanan KK security rules to look at budget. And currently there are none. So this user basically, as an assistant principal, they really have none of these permissions that they're going to need. So the system will need to update all of these parameters. So this shows you kind of like the full gamut of permissions. 26 roles in FMS, create a route control, add the route control to the department approver role, add KK security, expense manager, general ledger. Quite a few different tasks to manually do. So now what we're going to do is we're going to update his job code. Okay, so I'm in job data. I'm going to add a row. Going to transfer. So currently assistant principal at location 0842. So we're going to move him to location 0371. Okay. Getting some errors here. Just because I didn't bother to go into and adjust his salary plan and payroll, so system is warning me about that. Okay, so I've updated his job record, but for this to become effective, especially in the view that we created, I'm going to have to update the employees table and run the per 99 job. Okay, so we're going to run this. Just takes a few seconds. While we're waiting for that, I just want to say that the integration of PLC was actually a great process. Jay and Greg were great to work with. If we ever had any issues, they addressed those and took care of them immediately. Joe Reedy kind of like ran the team and very attentive to our needs. They brought in David Cantor, who helped us integrate the server and get things going. And Poonam Para and Aryan Sharma helped us with the workflows and listened to all of our needs and made sure that the workflows did exactly what we needed. So that was awesome. All right, so the job is finished. And now Canaan is coming up in the view at Mirror Lakes Elementary. So now we're going to go to Pathlock and we're going to basically run the synchronized organizational structure. Okay, so this takes a minute to run. While it does, I'm just going to take a minute to show you what the view looks like. Okay, so this is the SQL view. So basically what the view shows is employee ID, last name, first name, location, department, job code, job title, subfunction, and their reports to manager. So through all of this, it gives Pathlock everything it needs to automate. Okay, it looks like we're just about done. Okay, so we're going to share FMS. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is that on Canaan's account, we can see that the service account updated his account at 137. So we see that there was movement. So we looked at Canaan's account previously, and he had only one role, the baseline role in FMS. Now we can see that Canaan actually has 26 roles, 26 static roles, and 4 dynamic roles. We can also see that if we go to requisition department approver role, oh, looks like it hasn't done that yet. So let's go here. Oh, so KK security is done. Okay, so Canaan's KK security roles are updated for location 0371. So now he has the ability to do budget inquiry or transfers. If we go into procurement, we can see that now Canaan has the approval ability. So that permission was updated by Pathlock. We can see that he has a route control now. So Kanan basically, it says updated by Pathlock at 1:38 p.m. So now he has the ability to approve requisitions for location 0371. Now to switch over to the HCM side, all right, so we're basically going to look at his HCM account. So now we can see that his row security has been updated to 0371. All the assistant principal roles were removed from his account and replaced with the principal roles. So Kanan is now set up as a principal. I want to show you this too. These are the emails that were sent by the workflow that describe what happened in the different PowerShell scripts. So we can see that this one updated row level security. It was passed location 371 and subfunction 400. This is what it did. It updated the expense manager, the route control, KK security, general ledger setup. It removed any delegators that he had. He probably didn't have any in this case. Performance assessment delegations, it removed those too. And procurement authorization. So this process really improved our process because going from having 20 to 30 a day, now during peak season, we only have maybe 2 to 3. So we're freed up to do other security related duties, and we definitely owe it to Pathlock.
Thank you, Charles. With that, yeah, we appreciate that walkthrough for your success story. You certainly didn't have to give us the kind words, but we do appreciate it. So it's kind of inspiring to see how you've taken something that is a tool and turned it into a real world benefit for you. So let's broaden the lens now. Our next session is going to be an interesting one. I think you're going to enjoy, because security isn't just about access provisioning. It's about larger threats to your organization that all of us face every day. So to explore this perspective, we're joined today by Scott Oggenbaum. He's a retired FBI agent. He's got decades of experience in cybercrime prevention. Scott, we would love to hear more about what you call the 4 truths of cybersecurity, and explain a little bit, particularly for those friends of ours in healthcare, why they're such a target. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Scott.
Jay, do you see the big smile on my face?
Yeah.
That's because I'm retired from the FBI. And,
Exactly.
the question I get all the time is, do you miss the FBI? And I'm like, are you kidding me? Not with everything in the news. I mean, let's get the record straight. I had an amazing 30-year career with the FBI. Came in 1988, left in 2018. Decades handling cybercrime, retired out of Nashville, Tennessee. I've seen a lot of things. Today, I travel around the world, around the country, with one goal: teaching individuals and organizations how to reduce their chances of becoming the next cybercrime victim. During my decades with the FBI, I've dealt with thousands of cybercrime victims. And I heard their stories. I kind of felt their pain. And that's what I'm here to do today, just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview. I love this topic. I'm very, very passionate. I'm from New York. I talk really fast, even though I'm living in Nashville, Tennessee. I even wrote a book on this topic called The Secret to Cybersecurity. Don't buy this book. Everyone here is going to get access to the audio version of this book. If you're looking to read a good book by an FBI agent who saved the day, put a lot of bad guys in jail, and is really technical, I'm not your guy. Okay, I'm sorry. You know, after interviewing thousands of cybercrime victims, I realized what the truth is to cybersecurity, and that is a majority of the victimizations easily could have been prevented if my end users were only armed with a couple of key pieces of information. This is in my blood. I've been talking about it to big organizations for decades, and I'm really excited to be part of this event with my friends at PeopleSoft and Pathlock. In the beginning, we talked about it. It takes a community to stay safe. We cannot do this on our own. We can't do this independently and in a vacuum. And that's why I'm so proud to partner with these guys today. That's my New York term for y'all, to take what we've learned to help you through storytelling and real life applications on how to be safe and really reducing your chances of becoming the next cybercrime victim. This is from a slide that I used in 2015. In 2015, and it was according to Cybersecurity Ventures, the cybercrime problem was a $3 trillion global problem. And this is 2015. I'm like the town crier when I'm with the FBI, and I'm telling organizations, hey, we have to take this seriously. We have to take these threats. There's a storm brewing. It's the business email compromise. It's something called ransomware. And if you want to put down in the chat here, or, what do you think the average response was from a publicly traded organization? And in 2015, they weren't taking the threat seriously. I would sit down with organizations. I'd say, what's your strategy? And they'd say to me, well, we got this and that. And I go, those are controls. They aren't a strategy. And here we are almost 10 years later, the cybercrime problems, $10 trillion problem, trillion, billion, it's still a lot. And unfortunately, it keeps going up. And people keep asking me the same questions over and over again. This was part of the guidance. With the FBI, we were providing copies of this. I was going out, I was talking about this. And you know what? I still give this guidance away to organizations today. Why? Because nothing's changed. We're still dealing with a lot of the same problems. Now it's wrapped in artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is making it go a lot quicker. Here's really an interesting chart that I put in to really show the problem. And if you look over on the left, I retired in 2018. I didn't think the problem could get any worse than it was in 2018. And look at how the problem keeps getting worse year after year. And it means that we're not doing something right if the problem keeps getting worse year after year. And this is one of the most asked questions I get all the time. Ransomware. Do we pay the ransom or do we not pay the ransom? Now, there's plenty of reasons, why we don't pay the ransom. I mean, when I was with the FBI, I used to tell people with a very straight face, we don't pay the ransom. I would see companies pay ransom on a Monday, not fix the vulnerabilities, and get hit again on a Wednesday. And then they'd call, they go, I can't believe we got hit again. And I'm like, those are criminals. But let me tell you, it's changed today. This is the wrong question. We're not asking, and everyone's like, it depends. I hear, well, we got a really great backup strategy. But when we talk about ransomware and we talk about what it's like to get hit without having access to your information, it's a horrible thing. And if anyone here has been through this before, you can really appreciate how painful it is to deal with. But I said something back in about 2017. It caused a lot of aggravation with a lot of general counsels when I was talking. Because I said, if an organization can allow an executable to run on their network and you can get impacted with ransomware, they could steal your information. And everybody went nuts. Don't say the B word, the breach word, because ransomware is not a breach. Ransomware is worse than a breach, because today's ransomware, and we can talk about this, I've had a lot of conversations with Greg, Jay about this. It's just an afterthought today, because now a cyber criminal wants to get access to your data. They're going to steal your data first. They're going to exfiltrate it. They're not using rocket science techniques. We're going to talk about some of the commonalities. They exfiltrate your data first, then they encrypt your network, then they encrypt your backups. And let me ask you, think about this rhetorically or call it out. How long can an organization survive without access to your information? And especially my friends in healthcare, where we hear all the time razor thin margins. If they can encrypt your information, they can steal your information. Are we having this discussion about the integrity of our information? What if, God forbid, you get that email that somebody got access to your system and did something as simple as change all the A's to B's in blood types and screws around with the integrity, or screws around with it in the education system with the grades? Do we have the tools in place that can really pick up on these types of things? And these are things that we really need to think about. I was dealing with a situation in healthcare. We had a healthcare provider who ended up getting hit with one of these incidents. They had everything backed up. They said, okay, we backed up the network. We backed up the data. They didn't steal anything. And they said to the cyber criminals, hey, go pound sand. And this, because they were asking $30 million, and the cyber criminals nuked the network. Anyone here want to take a guess on what it means to kind of nuke a network? It is not really a good situation for an organization. And why are we picking on healthcare all the time? Healthcare has not liquid gold, but you know what I'm talking about. PHI, information that could be used in furtherance of financial fraud, patient billing data, employee records, you name it, supply chain, vendor information. There's so much type of stuff. I do a lot of talks for healthcare organizations. Unfortunately, the doctors don't want to be bothered, taking these extra steps. There's so many problems that you as a healthcare information security practitioner have, but we don't have to tell you. And this is my job when I'm coming in and I'm trying to explain to the physicians' practices why they need to take these things seriously. And that's really a hard thing. So let me kind of talk to you about a cornerstone of what I really, talk about. It's in my book. This is what I call the 4 truths of cybersecurity. And this really plays in. This is not what I've learned in reading books. This is what I've learned from interviewing victims. And to this day, I've been retired for 8 years. I'm in the business of cybercrime prevention. I go out, I train companies how to have a cyber secure mindset, how to realize a really important part that I've learned. And unfortunately, when I get called by victims now, I'm hospice for victims. There's really not much I can do. I can refer them to IR, intrusion response provider, but the whole purpose of our talk today is on the prevention side. So the first thing that really comes over when I'm sitting down and talking to C-suites and doctors' practices, I don't have to really explain this to my information security professionals. You guys get this. But none of my victims ever expected to be a victim. Why would anybody want to target me is what I've heard time in and time again. We're a small physician's practice in Montana. We're a surgery center in Bismarck, North Dakota. We're not over in Silicon Valley. We're not in a big, large area. And we would hear this all the time. And when an organization got hit with a breach, and all of a sudden, I dealt with a K-12, got hit with a ransomware incident, or at the same time, the cyber criminals were able to get onto electronic health records because they were still using a platform that didn't have two-factor authentication. I know you might find this hard to believe that there are still healthcare organizations that don't have two-factor authentication. Once your data is stolen, once you are in a situation where bad guys get you, when you contact law enforcement, the chances of law enforcement getting your information back, getting your data back is really, really challenging. And even getting the feds to pick up the phone. When I was in Nashville and I retired in 2018, part of my role was being interactive with victims. And that's where I learned all my information. That's put me on the path for my new career. And it's not rocket science. You'll read that in my book. But I was dealing with one victim a day. And that was a lot. Today, when all of a sudden I had a situation where someone got hit with a business email compromise, they lost $700,000. It was very difficult for the FBI even to pick up the phone. Why? Not because they're lazy, because they had two agents that were dealing with, besides their own caseload that they're investigating, they are dealing with probably 100 complaints a week in Nashville. And Nashville isn't as big as some of the major cities here. So the problem keeps getting worse and worse. And it becomes very, very frustrating. When I joined the FBI, if you'd asked me the role of an agent in 95, it was easy. Bad people did bad things to good people. I worked with state and local cops. We put bad guys in jail. When I took this up as my core competency in 2003 and I went to Washington, D.C., all my friends made fun of me. They said the cybercrime problem is going to go away by 2006 and it's going to be solved by either Microsoft or Cisco. How's that working out for us? It isn't. And the victimizations went up. And then, so, as I'm going on in my career and all of a sudden someone is victimized, it leads me to the third truth of cybersecurity. And that is bringing the cyber criminals to justice is really, really challenging. Why is it challenging? Because today's cyber criminals, they're not the teenage hackers. They're not living in their mother's basement. We're dealing with transnational criminal enterprises that are motivated financially, that have ties to hostile governments. So who am I talking about? We're talking about Russia. We're talking about China. We used to have FBI agents in Moscow, and I used to say on Mondays, Wednesdays, and a half a days on Friday, they used to kind of cooperate as long as they weren't targeting the Russians, and the Russians didn't really care. But today we're dealing with the Chinese. We're dealing with pig butchering, which is a very technical cryptocurrency, social engineering. That's being organized by Chinese organized crime out of Myanmar. We are just seeing so much of this. So bringing the bad guys to justice is really hard. And I'm going to be honest, that kind of made me really depressed for years until I realized that a majority of the cybercrime victimizations easily could have been prevented if my end users were only armed with a couple of key pieces of information. I know I'm oversimplifying it, but the principles that I talk about is realizing that social engineering is the #1 tool in the cyber criminals tool belt. They're going to trick us into doing things we normally wouldn't do. And even if you got your email tightened up, that doesn't even matter, because they're going after us with text messages, telephone calls, QR code phishing, LinkedIn hijacking. There's about 10 different domains of social engineering. And within each one of those domains, there's so many different scams. So it's really being aware of that, making sure we're not the same person using the multiple passwords for platforms. We're seeing password reuse is killing us, and none of my victims had two-factor authentication. And here's the surefire way, and I'm going to challenge you here. If you're not using two-factor authentication on your mission-critical platforms at home, you're not going to understand why we need to do it at work. I just did a publicly traded company, and I had, 400 executives, and maybe 10% were using it at home. They just didn't get it. So whose job is it to tell us? Those are the simple things. You're going to get a copy of my book, but what were some of the commonalities that we had that I ended up dealing with? And these are the things you can read in my book all day long, but I can't do it. They didn't know who had access to their mission critical data. That was really, really the big thing. There was a lack of data classification within organizations. They treated all data as important. And what happens when you deal with all data is important? Nothing becomes important. And they didn't know who had access to all of this data. Think about it in your organization. Are you, coming up with least privilege? Are you giving the college intern access to everything within your network? And especially, we have to remember that IT is completely different than security. I dealt with situations where, and the bad guys are going to LinkedIn, they're finding out who are your super users in IT. Because unfortunately, I've seen so many times spreadsheets in spreadsheets of super users with all of the passwords. And they didn't have their logging features turned on. Another really big important step, and dealing with failure to implement proper offboarding procedures. I had one organization, new CISO came in. It took them probably 15 months to get a list of who were users within the organization that haven't logged in for a year. Now think about how scary that is, because if you can't figure out who hasn't logged in over a year, how are you going to figure out who are the authorized users that have the ability to get access to it? So what were some of the key takeaways that we dealt with, that are really important? Privileged user account control. We need to make sure that those things are in place. It's so important for organizations. And that's something that we really didn't have, that I see that they didn't have a good handle. And implement robust authentication mechanisms, making sure, that we have multi-factor authentication across the board, especially on remote access. And here's one of the things, even if you have that on your side and you're buttoned up, remember, are you training your users to really identify social engineering? I saw a great fraud that just happened. I just got 2 minutes and I just really want to tell you this story. Publicly traded company. They were doing everything in their power right, but somehow an email got through the filter. It got through the filter. It made its way to the C-suite. And it was a calendar invite from HR. And the calendar invite had a QR code embedded into it. Now, the company is using QR codes, and we all use QR code. So what did the executive do? It was the CFO of the company. He took out his cell phone, he scanned the QR code, and then the next thing that popped up on his phone was enter username and password. And he said to himself, well, I got to sync my calendar. So he entered in his credentials for the organization. And at that point in time, the two-factor authentication was tripped. He entered into two-factor authentication. Bad guys took control of a Fortune 500 company, defeated all the security. Now, luckily, they had something in place that was able to stop that. So there's a lot of things. That's why we have to have a proactive cybersecurity stance. We have have to do the training. I threw a ton of information at you. You're going to get a copy of my book. I'm going to be back, connect with me on LinkedIn. And what I'd like to do is introduce my friend Larry to take the stage, and we can come up and continue our conversation.
Thank you, Scott, so much for those insights. It's always fascinating to kind of peel behind the curtain and kind of understand the life of an FBI agent. So great insight and input for us. So thanks.
Thank you.
And thanks for sharing your book.
In a bit.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your book with the audience. So if you guys haven't seen it, the link where you can access Scott's book has been placed into the Q&A inbox. So yeah, and so moving on, I'm very excited that Larry Zagata is going to join us from our friends at MyPro, a longtime SI and full service trusted partner in the PeopleSoft space. So Larry, appreciate you taking the time out today to join us. I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. So we're going to do a presentation on enhancing PeopleSoft with configuration frameworks. We also refer to this as PeopleSoft end user experience, again, presented by MyPro Consulting. So just our agenda for today, I'm going to do a quick introduction of myself. We're going to talk through the value of the configuration tools. We're going to highlight some of the top configuration tools, go through a few examples, and then we'll move on to the next session. So with that, just a quick introduction of myself. Again, Larry Zagata, President, MyPro Consulting, been in IT for about 30 years. I have over 25 years of PeopleSoft experience. I worked at PeopleSoft for about 10 years. I started off consulting, implementing the finance supply chain products, moved into program management, and then had a stint with product strategy. So, and I've been with MyPro for about 15 years now. All right. So let's just chat quickly about the key value of configuration. What I want to say is, a lot of what we're going to talk about today, we normally would do a live demo, really to show you how easy and straightforward some of these configuration tools are that we'll talk about. And for the time we have today, we're just going to talk through it, maybe show a few examples, talk about some specifics. But please know that normally this is a demo, and actually, if anybody wants a live demo, we're happy to do that. So. But let's talk about the configuration value. So really the new tools, or the tools that have been out for a while, plus the tools that keep getting added, are really designed to allow organizations running PeopleSoft to avoid customizations. So really the mantra is, before making a customization, visit some of the tools that allow for configuration and try to leverage those, if at all possible, before proceeding with the customization. Customizations, as we all know, have a lot of overhead and maintenance, and anything we can do to avoid that is really beneficial. The tools also allow for decustomization. So I know a lot of us, as we do our PUM updates, we look for new product functionality and features to eliminate customizations. But it's also a great opportunity to look at the configuration tools and see if those tools can be leveraged to decustomize any customizations that you already have in place. So it's really a kind of a two-step activity. New features plus the configuration tools really will allow you to hopefully decustomize a considerable amount of what you may have in place over the years. I know lots of us have upgraded and just carried over customization after customization, year after year, after upgrade. Now these tools are really at a point where if you can decustomize, take the time, work through that in the PUM update, and kind of chip away at your customizations little by little. And then the other is improving the end user experience through personalization and configuration. So we can actually change how we interact with PeopleSoft without customization. A lot of the things we've done in the past, where we've changed pages to fit our needs, which would have been customizations, we no longer have to do. We can configure. So we can really kind of configure PeopleSoft to fit our specific needs. So, and we'll talk and show a few of those things here in a few moments. So let's chat about some of the main configuration tools that PeopleSoft has made available to us. So we'll talk about a few of these things. Activity guides. I think we've all seen where it's embedded, where we have an activity guide that gives us kind of a step 1, step 2, step 3 process to completing a business transaction or a business process. Well, those actually are configurable. So not only do you have the ones that are delivered, but you can actually add an activity guide for other business process needs, making it very simple for your users, allowing them ease of training, and really not a foolproof, but close to foolproof process, guiding them through their activities. Navigation collections, we're actually going to talk about that and show one here as part of our detail. But those are a great way to simplify the navigation, simplify the menu structure for a user who has a specific job function, which also makes it easier for training, etc. We've got home pages and dashboards. So if you log in and you have certain tasks that you perform, or if you have 2 or 3 key dashboard reports that kind of drive your day, you log in, you look in your dashboard, that gives you feedback, that drives the decisions you have to make throughout the day. It's a great way to automate that, and it can be personalized and specific by user. Related content, related actions, we're going to show a little bit of that, talk about how if you have a page that doesn't quite have all of the information that you want on it, how you can set up related content, related actions to bring forward more information, avoiding customization. Talk about a little bit about PeopleSoft Insights, which are the open search, the dashboards, and the business intelligence component. We'll talk. We've got work centers, which kind of your one-stop shopping point for a job function, whether it be a GL work center or inventory work center, et cetera. But it's kind of that one-stop shopping that you can completely configure to your needs, adding content, adding reports, queries, tiles, etc. Fluid pivot grids. So if you've ever used Excel and you've had a pivot grid in your Excel, you know the value of that functionality. You can actually take fluid pivot grids, put them inside of PeopleSoft, whether it's a page or transaction, and allow you to interact with the data to really kind of answer business questions. We're talking about eliminating customizations. Drop zones. Drop zones allow you to put fields on a page. There's a section of the page that's reserved for new fields. So you're able to actually put fields and therefore data onto pages without customization. Event mapping, you're allowed to, you can do some people code execution without customization. Forms and approval builder, you can create forms for data entry. You can get those approved through a workflow process. Page and field configurator, a big one where we can alter the content of a page, which we'll show here shortly. And then one of my favorites, very simple, but drilling URLs where you add hyperlinks inside a query, improving the ability to navigate and get the information you need based upon query results. So we'll talk about that and show that as well. So just kind of some background on the different tools available. One of the main messages we want to leave, though, is, let's see here. We have to ensure that both IT and the business understand what these tools can do. So from an IT perspective, IT is going to understand these tools are available. They're going to understand the capabilities, how to use them, but they may not understand how to apply them from a business perspective. On the business side, they may not even know these tools exist unless you educate them on these tools. So the combination of IT knowing the tools, business knowing how they could be applied to improve the business process is key. It really takes both to take advantage of the full power of these new configuration tools. So, all right, let's just talk about a few of these. So insights and dashboards. So if you haven't taken advantage of the insights, these are the open source dashboards. They're based upon indexing. They have great performance. They're really designed to provide you, I use the word insight, to business information or provide answers to business questions. So if you think of a report is the presentation of data in a structured format, right? It presents data. Whereas these insights provide you answers to your business questions. You can drill into these, you can configure new ones, and they're all designed for information. So if you haven't deployed these out to your end users, if you haven't deployed these out to your executives, these are great tools to start leveraging. And there's certainly a ton of delivered ones, and you can also configure new ones that fit your specific needs. But they're drillable. They provide a lot of data and information. And again, HR, payroll, benefits, inventory, purchasing, GL, AR, across the board. There's a ton of them that, again, really should be deployed and taken advantage of. Page and field configurator. This is one of my favorites. So in the past, if you've ever needed to change a field or a page, in PeopleSoft, you know that you've had to do a customization. You automatically open up App Designer, you have to add a field or make a field required, etc. Technically, all a customization. With Page and Field Configurator, you no longer have to do that. You can make changes to your pages through configuration. So this is just a standard purchase order page. So using Page and Field Configurator, and again, normally we demo how to do this because it really is straightforward. You could make some changes. So for example, we had business unit here before, but if business unit isn't a term that's familiar within your organization, you use division or business or whatever it may be, you can change the content to fit your needs. If there's certain things you don't want to have available to users on this page, you don't have to go through the steps of security to remove it. You can use Page and Field Configurator. So here we had a very active drop-down list on copy from. We removed that. We could also remove copy from. Down here at the bottom, we've got this line. This was all visible and editable. We can make this visible, but not editable. So we could also make fields required. We could add default values. There's a lot of things using Page and Field Configurator that you can use to make it specific to your organization's needs. The other thing that's really key is that you can also apply criteria. So if you only wanted to apply changes to business unit 1, you could do that. If you didn't want those business changes to apply to another business unit, you could set the rules for that to happen. So if you have different needs amongst your divisions or business units, you can make that happen. If you want certain users or certain roles to see changes but not others, that's all built in. The power of Page and Field Configurator, again, making this specific to your organization. Okay. Nav collection. So, we all know the navigator, right? Very large menu, lots of options. So unless you've narrowed it down through security, it's complex. So imagine you're a user or a new user and you're navigating a large, complex menu. So it requires training, requires a lot of use of favorites, things of that nature. Well, if you were to use navigation collection, you can make it very simplified for the end user. So this is great for somebody that has a very, very specific job function. So for instance, if we had a resource here where I built this navigation collection and they're in purchasing, maybe they focus on requisitions or return to vendor, or they do 2-3 things, right? You build this navigation collection, you pop a tile on their homepage, they click on the tile, and this is their navigation. That's it. So they toggle back and forth between these 4 things that they do as a job function. So you really have been able to simplify it. And imagine now where somebody switches a job function or you have a new resource, you don't have to spend all this time on training navigation. It's really back and forth on a limited menu that you've created specific for them. So navigation collection is a great way to do that. Very easy to do. So again, making this specific to your users and organizational needs. Drilling URLs. This is a favorite of mine. So I think we've all seen that there's delivered queries, and in those queries, sometimes there's hyperlinks. Well, the key is that you can put those hyperlinks on almost any query, and it's very straightforward to do. So imagine your users have a bunch of queries that they run, and what happens next? You run your query, you grab a piece of paper, you grab your pen, and you write down the information that you need to follow up on. And then once you write it down, you go figure out the navigation and you go find that page and you get the detailed information that you need. Well, with drilling URLs, you simply add these hyperlinks. We've got one set up under business unit and purchase order to your query. And when the user goes into their query, they click on the hyperlink and it takes them right to the page. So it's just another pop-up window. That page pulls in the business unit, pulls in the purchase order ID, brings up the specific information, and they auto-navigate right to the page. So you are saving them minutes in navigation, but think about how those minutes add up when you do this over and over and over on a daily basis. You can save them a ton of time just by adding these simple little hyperlinks to your queries. So it's a great configuration tool to really improve that user experience. Not only can you do that, but you can add these queries to fluid pivot grid. So when you've got your pivot grid set up, you can do your filtering, do your sorting, still click on the hyperlink and go from your pivot grid to the source page. You can put these in your BI publisher reports. So any BI publisher report, you can pop in these hyperlinks and do the same thing from your BI publisher report. So you schedule a report, up comes your report. Now it's not just a report, it's interactive because you can click on the link and take you to the data source. Again, really, really time saving for your end users. Okay. All right, one more we'll talk about. Related content and related action. So I think we've all been there where for our business purpose, a page just does not have all the information we need. We're always wanting a little another piece of information, but then if it's not on the page, you either have to customize it to add to that page, or you're going off, opening a new window and doing the navigation, which is inconvenient. But with related content, related action, what you end up doing is using that functionality to pull in other pages which are related to the data on this page. So for example, you'll see here this action button. We can set it up so you can go and link to another page or report or dashboard or whatever content we need. So, so what we would end up doing there is setting that up. And instead of adding content to a page, we now have these hyperlinks. And in a sense, you're doing the same thing where you're providing additional information, different insight without that customization. So, all right. And then I just want to leave you with one other thing. So there's a lot of information. There's a lot of this content with the new tools. I want to make sure that, you're able to find the information and research it. So there's a lot of great sources out there. PeopleSoftInfo.com is the main source. Then you've got your CFO tool, you've got blogs, you've got YouTube channels. MyPro's got some data sheets. We have our own YouTube channel. It is pre-recorded where we'll go through a demo of configuring related content, related actions, etc. So a lot of information there. So with that, on to our next topic. There's a recorded video from Jim Marion, since he couldn't be here. So back to you, Jay.
Thanks, Larry. I appreciate that. Always great to get some insight. You guys have been such a great partner in the PeopleSoft community and have such great knowledge and resources. So thanks for joining. Yeah, so now we've seen how configuration frameworks can help reduce complexity and improve your overall PeopleSoft experience. But to make sure that those improvements kind of hold up over time, testing is critical, right? So Jim Marion, Oracle ACE and People Tools expert, is going to walk us through, some of the PTF, the PeopleSoft testing framework. Jim, couldn't be here today. He had a conflict that came up, but he graciously recorded his session. And so we're going to share it as part of the Innovation Summit. So it will be a recorded session. And if Alexi, if you want to start that, we'll jump to that.
Thank you for joining me and my colleagues for this year's Pathlock Innovation Summit, and thank you, Pathlock, for hosting this event. I know you're going to get some great ideas out of these sessions. Now today, I want to talk to you about some problems I have with some newer PeopleTools features. Now, these PeopleTools features were designed to eliminate or reduce customizations. That sounds fantastic, but the problem that I have is that these new features also reduce visibility of the changes we make. See, the features that I'm talking about are event mapping, drop zones, and page and field configurator. And by the way, I absolutely love these features. I encourage everybody to use them as much as possible. But they become invisible, and that's kind of the point. See, when you and I, in the early days, we used to modify PeopleSoft delivered, like we would make page changes or we would modify code. But now we use event mapping, drop zones, and page and field configurator to isolate those customizations, to remove them from the Oracle delivered code base, allowing us to replace Oracle's code with Oracle's code without having to retrofit our changes. That sounds beautiful, but the problem is we lose visibility. And when we lose visibility, what we're losing is what customizations do we need to analyze to make sure, to ask the question, do we still need this? And then also when it comes to testing, what should we be testing? Now, I realize a lot of customers, every time they apply maintenance, they test 100% of the system. Rather than saying, okay, these are the only changes in the system, let's just test these changes. They're going to test everything. I understand that. But I still think it's helpful to know what's changed so we can put that at the top of the list. When we test, we want to make sure these are the things that still work. The problem that we have with event mapping, drop zones, and page and field configurator is they don't show on compare reports anymore. And so we no longer have that work list to ask the question, do we still need this customization? I put customizations in air quotes because when we're using event mapping, drop zones, and page field configurator, we are not technically customizing Oracle's delivered pages and components anymore. Or at least not at design time. What do I mean by that? We're still making changes. We're still making changes that could break, but we're making those changes at runtime, allowing PeopleSoft to inject our changes into the runtime code base rather than you and I making those page and code changes at design time. So let's take a look at some examples in our PeopleSoft system. So on my homepage, I have the original addresses component. And so when PeopleTools released event mapping, I started looking around at different components and asking the question, what might I want to change on these components? And so I came up with some ideas on the addresses page. Now, keep in mind, this was right after PeopleTools 8.5.5 released. And so I made the changes using event mapping, and then roughly 8 years went by. So think about that in the number of PUM images. So what, we get roughly 3 PUM images per year. Then we look at 8 years. So that'd be 3 times 8. So over 8 years, I was able to apply maintenance and completely forget about this addresses component and the address changes that I'd made. But let me show you. At a certain point, I applied maintenance and suddenly the addresses component broke. I started getting this error message. And this error message, if we look at it, it says that site-specific prefix JSM persdet EVT. EVT is the suffix that we use for event mapping. So this is telling me that my event mapping people code broke. Now, I just know that because I know my naming conventions, but who do you think found this issue? After we applied maintenance, we did our compare reports, and in the compare reports, this addresses component did not show up as changed. So through the testing phase, our users found this. Our users identified there was an issue and then had to go back to development. And depending on who the developer was, whether they're using the same naming conventions as me, whether they understand our policies, they may have spent extra effort trying to figure out what caused this issue. In fact, I've seen where customers, while browsing my Oracle support, I've seen where customers have filed tickets with my Oracle support asking them to fix issues with PeopleTools that weren't PeopleTools issues. They were event mapping issues. The one specifically I'm thinking of is that the customer, when they clicked on the nav bar, an error message would appear. Well, why is that? Because the developers had come up with this great idea. They said, almost every time our users click on the nav bar, they automatically want to go to menu. So why don't we add some event mapping that when the user clicks on the nav bar, it instantly opens up the menu? That sounds fantastic. But if we don't have testing and we don't have some sort of way to identify that the issue that appears is event mapping, then our users or other developers are going to get error messages like the one we saw here, and then file tickets with my Oracle support saying, you delivered this. We ran our compare reports. The compare reports show that there are no issues, but we are suddenly getting an error message appearing on the screen. So we need your help. Well, in the case of the navigator, my Oracle support analyst did some research and discovered that the customer had event mapping code against the PeopleTools definitions, which was then causing that error message to appear. Let me give you another example. So in the My System profile, I'll bring up the original view of My System profile, and you can see that it has the language code, currency code, and the default mobile page. What? Nobody uses that anymore. And so using Page and Field Configurator, we marked this as display only. We marked this as display only, and then we eliminated the default mobile page, just marked it as hidden. The reason we wanted users to have access to the general personal information or the My System profile was to be able to set up their workflow alternate routing when they're out of the office. And then you look at the bottom and you see there is email, and there was another grid here in the earlier PeopleTools releases. It was for the XMPP protocol. What is that? So in the early days of instant messaging, that was a very common protocol using Jabber as an instant messaging server, primarily for the multi-channel framework and multi-channel console, so that we could send notifications out to users through PeopleSoft using the multi-channel framework. So as we were configuring all of this, we used Page and Field Configurator for the upper fields because Page and Field Configurator can handle that, but Page and Field Configurator cannot hide grids. So we used event mapping. And then PeopleTools removed the XMPP grid, and we started getting this error message appear on the screen. Now, keep in mind, as we're running our compare reports during maintenance, those compare reports show no changes. Or shall I rephrase that? They show no changes from us. They just show changes from Oracle. So how do you identify these issues? First question, do you need to? Well, I think so. I mean, we certainly can't go live with this. But we do have functional testers, right? And they can catch this sort of thing. In fact, that's kind of why we have them. But shouldn't you and I be catching them first? I mean, if you think about it, in the old days when we actually modified Oracle delivered code, we would have received a compare report that would then become our work list. And in that work list, we would be retrofitting our changes and making sure they still work. But now with Event Mapping Page Field Configurator, we don't have compare reports to depend on, but we still need to make sure that our solutions work. So what is the solution to this? I mean, what can you and I do? So Oracle knows about this visibility issue, and they have released some cross-reference reports. So you can take, for example, a project name, your change project from Application Designer, and then run a cross-reference report to find all of the event mapping, and by definition, all of the page and field configurator as well. And they also have one for drop zones. So we can identify all of these changes that we made, so we can then analyze them. What are you doing when you're analyzing them? Well, you're asking, do we still need this customization? And you know the answer to that already. So stop asking the question. The answer is yes. I mean, yes, on occasion, we do find something that, say, Oracle has replaced, and we don't need it anymore. But as I've gone through that analysis phase with my users, I found that the answer is always yes, and the answer is yes for two reasons. Number one, we definitely need it. And number two, we don't know why it's there, and we're afraid if you take it away, something will break. So the answer is always yes. But the other thing is we use this for our testing list to know we need to make sure this still works. And of course, during the retrofit phase, you're going to be doing some testing anyway, because you're going to be copying over that code. And after you're done copying over that code, you're going to test it and make sure it still works. You're also going to look for the code around it to see if something changed that maybe requires me to change my code. But with event mapping, drop zones, and page and field configurator, we skip all of that. So again, what's another solution? See, I don't like the cross-reference reports because they're forcing me to look at everything, to ask that question, does it work? And do we still need it? Well, since the answer is always yes, the next question is, does it still work? Well, some of it may not, like the examples that we see here. So then what? My recommendation is you use PeopleSoft Test Framework to create what we call regression tests. So I have a handful of regression tests, and let's just go ahead and run these against the Oracle delivered components with our event mapping changes. So let's go with the grid one, where we are expecting we expect the grids to disappear. But as we know, it's broken. So the system is going to fail. So when I created the change through event mapping, I then recorded a regression test. I want you to see these regression tests are super simple. They're just a couple of lines. So obviously there's a browser start login, then there's a navigation phase, then there is our test. That's it. That's it. Now, in this case, because it's a not exist, if it fails, awesome. That's what we want to happen, or not. I mean, that's actually important, right? Because then that gives us a shortened work list. So you're like, oh, we've got all the failed regression tests. Those are things we need to analyze and fix. But in this case, the not exist or the exist, if they pass, they don't do anything. So we have one extra line in here that just says, hey, if we made it this far, we passed. I have another one here to show you, and that is the addresses one. So in the addresses test, it's start login again, then it's navigate, and then it's just verify something on the page. Okay, so with both of these, what we saw is when they failed, a message appears on the screen. So that's really what the test framework is going to capture. The test framework is going to say, uh-oh, a message appeared, and I'm not configured for message recognition. I don't know what to do with this message. That's going to be our red stoplight, our red flag, tells us we need to resolve an issue. So just for fun, let's go ahead and run one of these tests and let's see what happens. I'm fully expecting it to fail, right? I mean, we did a manual test and it failed. So this is PeopleSoft Test Framework running through the automated, logged in. That was step one. Step two is navigate. Oh, it never got to step three because the error message popped up on the screen, which is exactly what we expected. And that's what we want our test to do. And then our test fails, and then it logs a screenshot showing us what that message is. So say you've got a couple dozen of these regression tests and 2 fail, or maybe you have hundreds of these regression tests and a few fail. Then what do? Well, now instead of reviewing every single isolated customization from a cross-reference report, you're reviewing just the ones that failed. I think that's a great idea. So let's go into Application Designer and let's fix this one that failed. So in this case, what we discovered was that PeopleSoft removed the instant messaging grid. Okay, there you go. One of those customizations that we no longer need. We had a customization to remove the instant messaging grid, but PeopleSoft is doing that now. So the reason it failed was because our code was referring to something that no longer exists. And that's the risk. The risk with event mapping, drop zones, and page field configurator is that you are still referring to fields, making changes to the page to items that no longer exist. So let's run the test again. This time we'll watch it. And this time I I expect it to pass. I mean, who knows? Maybe there's something else wrong. So again, PTF has taken over. PTF is signing in. And then PTF is going to, there's always some pauses in there as it goes, right? But it's going to navigate. Oh, the page worked. And now it's looking for that grid. and it didn't find the grid. This time it's looking for the email grid because we had both. Because the interesting thing about PeopleSoft is that there are actually two places that it stores email addresses. It's storing them in the user profile, and then it's also storing them in the person model, the HR person of interest person model. And so since our users are employees, we wanted to make sure that we're only maintaining their emails, or they're only maintaining their email addresses from one place. And then we'll use an automated process to make sure both locations stay in sync. So what about drop zones? So I have a page put together with a drop zone. Let's return home and let's look at it. It is direct deposit. So first I want to show you what does direct deposit look like just out of the box. It looks like this. And we noticed that this is the only one we found, employee self-service page that doesn't tell me who I am or what I look like. Meaning all these self-service pages put a picture up there in the corner of what you look like. And they also tell you what your name is. I don't know what they think of me, that I don't remember my name or what I look like or what. But anyways, we noticed this is the only one that doesn't have those. And we thought, well, it should have that. So let's go into drop zones and let's add that back in. We created a drop zone just to show you in Application Designer briefly what the page looks like at design time. It's just a subpage with, since it's fluid, lots of group boxes. And let's add that to this page here, TRNEE. Let's add it to our direct deposit page. And we're going to put it in PYIC DIR DEP FL. So we teach drop zones regularly. We have a full one-day on-demand course for just drop zones as well, if you're interested. Let's just type in TRN. Perfect. That's the one. Where's the save button? Do you see the save button on this page? We're supposed to save. I'm scrolling. Oh, there it is. They put it at the bottom. Why'd they do that? I think that's funny because if you look at a lot of the back office or just fluid self-service pages in the back office, if you look at the fluid self-service pages today, most everything puts a save button somewhere visible, like on the top even, or the action buttons like the approve on the approval workflow engine. You'll find the approve buttons in the upper right corner. Why? Because they're easy to find and see. And if you put them in the custom header bottom section, then they're sticky, so they stay there as you scroll. Why'd they do that? Why'd they put them at the bottom of a grid that's already going to span the entire height? I don't know. Anyways, we have this configured, we have saved it, awesome. So now let's go ahead and launch direct deposit and look at the changes that we made through the drop zones. So now considering this one, what could break? Because this is all brand new content. It's my content, except that I am using all Oracle delivered fields. So this is an Oracle delivered field for the photo. It's an Oracle delivered record, Oracle delivered record field, Oracle delivered record field. In fact, I even have hidden fields here for display control, and these are related display. So those are all Oracle delivered fields. Now, Oracle might make changes to those fields, and when they do, then obviously my solution would break. So therefore, I want to record a regression test using PTF. Now, the funny thing about those regression tests, because in this case, what I would do is run the PTF recorder, and then when the PTF recorder gets to this spot, I'm going to right click, and from the PTF menu, I'm going to choose verify or add action verify, and I'm just going to verify that the EMPL ID is KU0007. Now, seriously, is there ever a time where it would not be for this logged in user? No, I'm not really testing that. What I'm testing for is to see, did an error message pop up on the screen? Because if I'm referring to a field that no longer exists, it's going to throw an error message. Now, I can't really write a PTF test that's going to capture or verify what error appeared. That's not my intention. My intention is just to find out, did an error appear? At JSM Pros, we teach tips like this every week. Check out our online schedule and sign up for a live virtual class or enroll in one of our on-demand training courses to train on your schedule. Or contact us to schedule a dedicated virtual or on-site session. And while you're on our site, be sure to create a free account to gain access to hours of free content, including webinar replays, free courses, and sound bites. And I also want to make sure you know about our All Access Pass. For one low fee, less than the cost of a People Tools training course, you get access to all of our on-demand training for 1 year. Now, this is a screaming deal for new developers, but it's also incredibly valuable for your seasoned developers as well, who use our service to find quick answers to development challenges. In fact, we are giving away a free subscription during this summit. So take out your phone, scan the QR code, and enter to win. Now, here's how it works. You enter, we draw a name, and then we'll call your phone number. But here's the catch. You have to answer to win. So keep an eye out for a call from 509-888-7767. And now I want to turn this back over to the moderator.
All right. Thank you as always, Jim. Jim's always the most excited person about PeopleSoft you'll ever meet, but he's also one of the most knowledgeable. So great to have him participate. Sorry we're missing him live today. He's going to be missed as we move to the final session here in today's PeopleSoft Innovation Summit. And this one's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a live Ask the Experts panel. So if you haven't done so already and you've had some questions built up along the way, please put your questions into the inbox and we will try and serve them up to the panel. I'd like for our panelists to get back on screen, please. Go ahead and turn on your cameras as we go through this Ask the Expert session. We've had a great session today. We've gone wide and then we've gone deep. And so I think it's wide open for our participants to ask some questions. We did have a couple that came in earlier, and we want to address those. I think one of the early questions on was probably for you, Charles, while you were giving your presentation about automation of provisioning in PeopleSoft. You mentioned how you leverage PowerShell scripts in conjunction and integrated with the PathLock Cloud Access Governance Automation solution. One question from Sukhinder was, is your PowerShell integrated with Active Directory?
So at this time, it's not. Our PowerShell scripts just write directly to the PeopleSoft databases and tables, but it could be. So that would be something that we could integrate, but in our current integration, we don't have that.
Okay. While we're talking to you, Charles, there was another question that came in that was directed your way. And that is, how does the system behave if they're performing multiple roles or doing a temporary assignment, perhaps? I don't know if that's one that you want to jump in on, and maybe Greg, you want to comment as well.
So yeah, that's a great question actually, because what happens? We've already basically set up all the different sub-functions with the business roles. But what if someone's doing a temporary assignment? So that would be a manual request. So that would be one of the few situations where we would still rely on our request forms in that particular case for our integration and say, we would give them additional roles based on that temporary assignment and then remove them when they're done. There is a way to automate that also. We're not currently utilizing that feature though. Greg, I don't know if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I was just going to comment when you were done. So with the PathLock Cloud solution, we do have a couple other options. One of them would be an additional access request. Typically what we kind of talk about is anything an additional access request could be typically done because it needs approval. So, if somebody has multiple jobs, for example, or a scenario like that, you could have the first one done automatically, and then you could add the additional ones in as extra. There's also something that we can do called emergency access management, which is kind of like a break glass type scenario. So that one's typically given for roles that are only going to be used for a window of time that could be maybe a couple hours to maybe a couple of days, and then it would automatically remove those roles. So there's a couple of different things that we can do there around additional granting of multiple roles.
Great. And so if you're doing a temporary assignment as well, Greg?
Yeah, the temporary assignment is really around the urgent emergency access. So you can set that to hours, if you want to set it up to where, let's say Charles is the admin and you want to have him have a certain role to do some things to production this weekend. You could give it to him from like 4 to 6 on Saturday or something like that, and then it rolls off when the time is expired. So it's a little bit more finite period of time, rather than giving somebody roles and then coming back to look at it maybe within a user access review or 3 to 6 months later, for example.
Great, thanks. We did have a couple of questions that were submitted privately during the session. One of the questions is for you, Larry. What tools do you feel like offers the most value when it comes to organizations that are trying to de-customize PeopleSoft?
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I think that maps very nicely to Jim's presentation, actually. So I think we call them the big three would be page and field configurator, drop zones, and event mapping. So I think those tools offer the best ability to decustomize and avoid future customizations. Just what they do and the normal and typical customizations that most customers make, I think those offer a lot of value in being able to configure versus customize. So oddly enough, maps very nicely to Jim's presentation on how to then control the testing to make sure that you account for them. Says, as he pointed out, they're no longer objects that you would track on a compare report. You have to deal with them in a different manner. But those are the three.
Great. Thanks for that insight. There's another question I think probably also might have been good for for Jim's bucket, but unfortunately Jim couldn't make it today. But maybe Larry, you can also answer this one. So kind of following the same line of questioning, if you're an organization and you want to get your team familiar with those tools, what do you think is the best path moving forward for that? How to get teams more familiar with the tools and leveraging them better?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, go back to what I had said during the presentation, is it's very important that when you're talking about getting your team familiar with these tools, team should consist of your IT team and your business team. So business analysts, because we want to make sure, again, both understand the value of these tools and how to apply them to better your business, right? So we want to make sure we understand that. And then, go back to that page we had with all the information sources. There's a ton of information out there. There are those YouTube videos. There's insights. There's the CFO tool. I'd say start with PeopleSoftInfo.com. There's a ton of links that will take you to some of these insight videos on explaining these tools. Again, on the MyPro page, we have several videos where we'll go through and actually demonstrate how to use all these. But I'd say PeopleSoftInfo.com is your starting point, and leverage all those access points from there.
Great. Thanks, Larry. Appreciate that insight. That's good information. I want to turn the questions now to our FBI expert, Scott. I'm always fascinated. I've heard you present a couple of sessions. I'm sure you've got quite a few stories to tell at the dinner table or over a cold beer. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on AI? Everybody's, everything is about AI. You can't go to a session these days. It's not talking about AI, figuring out how to incorporate AI in the positive way. But, when it comes to some of the negative uses of it, a lot of people aren't really talking as much about that. How do you think, what are your thoughts on AI, and will it keep us safer or will it harm us?
Unfortunately, I think, in the short term, it's going to harm us, because now everything that a cyber criminal needs is at their fingertips through a free chat GPT. And I'm seeing it so much. We're having an intersection between social engineering, artificial intelligence is being used to enhance it. And you don't have to be a programmer. You don't have to have a lot of skill. So what do we have? We have the holiday shopping season coming up. So what are we going to start seeing? Better looking emails that are being come through. And everyone says, but I got a great email protection program. The cyber criminals are targeting us. They're targeting our family. We're going to be seeing them in text messages. There's so much information that's available on the dark web, all of our cell phones. So we're going to be seeing a lot of imposter scams through cell phones, robocalls. I'm telling everyone here, have a safe word with your family. I'm going to be doing quite a bit of traveling. If I'm calling my family up and I need money, I'm in an emergency and I can't remember the safe word, let me die. You know, that's what I tell everyone over here. So take these kind of precautions. Also, we talked about the QR code phishing. You know, be careful, be aware of that, and especially on social media and that stuff. And I see there's another question that came in about, you know, I'm a big advocate on 2FA. I'm amazed that more people aren't using it. I challenge you all tonight, secure your mission critical accounts. But as more organizations are realizing this and they're making it mandatory, in the small businesses and academia, our third parties aren't using it. And that's where we're seeing the whole thing is playing in. We're looking for a technical solution for people problems. And until we realize that, we're going to continue to see an increase in cybercrime.
Great. Yeah, that's great insight. I'm glad I'm not part of your family based on your response.
It's a lot of fun when we're drinking and talking about this. Today, my son went out. He started his first job, you know, as a mechanical engineer, 22 years old. So I had to have the talk with the kid. And number one thing I said to my son is, if you get a text message or an email from the boss and he asks for gift cards, don't do it. Because every organization is seeing that. So, you know, we got to be prepared for the young people, the seniors.
Well, it's great advice on the safe word. That's one thing I'm going to take away for sure for this. Yeah, and I did also see the question. David Dick, thanks for sending the question in. He's asked, besides 2FA, what's the biggest security improvement businesses do and what most are not doing? So appreciate your insight. I'd also like to get Greg Wentz insight. Greg, you work as a security director, an executive director of a platform that enables 2FA with PeopleSoft. What else are you seeing as the biggest security improvement that most are not doing today?
You know, Jay, I think it really comes down to kind of what I commented about earlier. It's a layered approach. You know, 2FA is really that help to get you at the front door. But if they get past that, do you have the correct pieces in place to be able to understand what's happening? So, you know, I always say there's better ways to mask data, protect PII, even where then you don't necessarily have to rely on multi-factor. Also logging. You know, logging is underlooked and really missed, you know, whether it's from a security perspective, whether it's from an audit side, you know, understanding how your system is being used and being able to track user sessions and seeing the things that they access, you know, it becomes power. You know, you know what they're using, what they're accessing, you know, if they're using your customizations, for example. You know, it's simple business decisions, but then also it allows you to understand the data that's being utilized. And going back to the, you know, the breach where all the data was lost, you would have been able to see things like that and would have been able to make, you know, adjustments to that long before, you know, all of a sudden a 2-month period goes by, because you would be able to have access to that type of transaction and knowledge. So for me, it's really a layered approach. You know, MFA is a start. It has to be. You know, Scott would probably say the same thing. It's due diligence. You know, it's the bread and butter. You know, and then you have to really layer in the next pieces on top of it.
Yeah, no, that's great. And, you know, working with you and sitting in a lot of these sessions that you do for security, you know, the other thing that I think is also important these days is visibility. I hear organizations wanting better visibility into who's doing what inside their systems, being more proactive about looking for anomalous behavior. You know, I think, Scott, you know, perhaps you would agree that in most of these cases with ransomware attacks, sometimes, forensically, it's very challenging to determine how long somebody's actually been in your system before they initiated that attack. So getting visibility prior to that happening and keep paying attention to anomalous behavior is also important. We're right up at the top of the hour. We're happy to take any additional questions if there are any from our attendees. If you guys would put them in the chat box, we'll hang out for another minute, see if there are. Otherwise, we do appreciate all of our presenters today taking time. We want to thank all of our amazing speakers and for everyone who joined us today. We covered a lot of ground in a short period of time. I hope you guys enjoyed the format. We hope you're leaving with some new ideas you can put into action. The full recording here and the slides will be sent your way shortly. You'll be followed up with in case there's anything that we weren't able to answer for you or things that you thought of later. Until then, stay warm, stay secure, and innovate. And we'll see you at the next PeopleSoft Summit. Take care, everyone.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.